The 6th Henrico County police officer killed in the line of duty was Donald Aubrey Stillman. At the time of his last call for service, he was 28 years of age and was a 7-year veteran. He was born in Richmond in 1956. He lived in Henrico County in the Varina district. He was raised by his parents and attended the Henrico County Public Schools. He graduated in 1974 from Varina High School. On September the 14th of 1977, Donald was hired to be a police officer. On his last call for service of that evening of November the 8th of 1984, he was assigned to have a ride-along with him in his marked car. That ride-along was a communications officer Mark Thompson, as they patrolled the area of the far west end of Henrico County, in the area off of Lauderdale Drive and behind an area of Carver Elementary School. Donald was checking an area that was a residential neighborhood in a state of construction. It was an early construction state that it was in. Donald, in past shifts, had found stolen vehicles and/or persons that were trespassing in that area. So he was routinely checking it when he was on the midnight shift to ensure that no one was in that vicinity of the construction site. And as they moved in that construction area, they came upon a Volkswagen Beetle sedan that was parked within the wooded area and roads under construction. As Donald pulled up on this vehicle, he put his spotlight on the rear window, radioed to communications, advised them that he was out with this suspicious vehicle, gave the license plate, and began to exit his patrol car. As he did, there was a sudden movement in the back seat of the Volkswagen, and the right front seat was pushed forward, and the right front door opened on that passenger side, and a male subject was seen attempting to pull his jeans up around his waist and was exiting the vehicle rapidly. At this point, Officer Stillman radioed on his portable that he would be foot pursuing subject fleeing from that car, and they entered into the woods in a northerly direction parallel to Lauderdale Drive and ran approximately 300 feet into the woods. This is shortly after midnight on November the 8th. It's a clear night, it's a full moon, there is that light, but at the same time, Officer Stillman has a large flashlight that he's using as he's running after this suspect. The suspect would trip over a small fallen tree in those woods and collapsed down face forward, at which time Officer Stillman transitioned into his weapon, his gun, and advised the subject to get up onto his knees, place his hands on his head. Officer Stillman then radioed on his portable that he had an apprehension. He then commanded the suspect to get to his feet. At that point, Mark Thompson, back at the scene of the Volkswagen sedan, had a woman that had exited, an adult female, from the back seat area. She was hysterical. Mark Thompson escorted her back on foot to the patrol car, and she began to advise her story that she had been abducted and that she had been held at knife point and that she was being sexually assaulted at the time when the officer and Mark Thompson had arrived. Upon hearing that she had been held at knife point and knowing that Donald had just radioed that he had an apprehension, Mark Thompson got on the radio and relayed a message to Officer Stillman, advising Stillman to use caution that the subject he had may be armed with a knife. At that point, there's 55 seconds of silence on the radio. During that period of silence, facts were developed that Officer Stillman was conducting a search of the suspect to determine if there were any weapons. The silence was broken by the sound of gunfire, and we now know that during that search, the suspect was able to obtain the officer's gun during a struggle, and the shots being fired were the suspect shooting Officer Stillman. Communications Officer Thompson immediately notified communications that they needed help, that gunshots had been fired. The suspect, after that moment in time, began to flee the area and was successful in escaping the area prior to police responding thoroughly and blocking off the area. There was a search conducted immediately for Officer Stillman, where he was found in the woods at the site of that original apprehension, and he was pronounced dead. The ensuing investigation developed a suspect. They checked for the suspect in the 900 block of Pump Road. He was not at home, but they understood where he worked, and they found him to be at a service station at Westbriar and Patterson, where he was a state inspector for inspection stickers on cars. At that point, he was questioned and taken into custody, and he was subsequently charged with the capital murder of Officer Stillman and the abduction, robbery, and sexual assault of the female victim, and was sentenced to life in prison in the Virginia Correction System. We remember the life and the service and the dedication to duty that Officer Stillman had displayed throughout his 7 years, and on this particular last call for service, his ultimate sacrifice that he gave in service to this county.